Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? Our session is about to begin. Please have a nice seat. Thank you. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the General Lecture on Protecting Global Wildlife Together, an introduction to applied conservation research by Copenhagen Zoo, a special lecture organized by Faculty of Biology, Universitas Jenderal Soedirman, in collaboration with Copenhagen Zoo, Denmark. I am Aulidia Nurul Habibah, your host for today. Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, in this occasion, I would like to greet Professor Dr. Agus Nuryanto, MSI, the Dean of Faculty of Biology, Universitas Jenderal Soedirman, Dr. Renat Erwin Rianto Aldi, MSc, Vice Dean for Academic Affairs, Faculty of Biology, Universitas Jenderal Soedirman, Professor Dr. Nuning Setianingrum, MSI, the Vice Dean for General Affairs and Finance, Faculty of Biology, Universitas Jenderal Soedirman. Our speaker, Mr. Simon Bruslun, hartelijk welkom in Fakultas Biologi, Universitas Jenderal Soedirman, from Copenhagen Zoo, Denmark. Mas Yudi, Hariawan Agung Wahyudi, Indonesia Program Leader for Copenhagen Zoo. Our moderator, Romanus Edi Prabowo, Pak Romi. All lecturer, Faculty of Biology, Universitas Jenderal Soedirman, and our beloved student of Faculty of Biology, Universitas Jenderal Soedirman. Good morning, and may this day bring us joy and meaningful insight. Ladies and gentlemen, please allow me first to read the agenda for today. The first agenda is the opening session. The second is singing of national anthem, Indonesia Raya. Then welcoming speech from the Dean of Faculty of Biology, Universitas Jenderal Soedirman. Following by certificate of appreciation granting and group photo session. And we will continue to the main session, the general lecture and discussion, and the last participant photo session together with speaker and closing. Ladies and gentlemen, to begin our event, let us take a moment to pray together. For those who are Muslim, you are welcome to recite Basmalah together. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Now, we are pleased to sing national anthem Indonesia Raya. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand up. Ladies and gentlemen, please sit back down. We are proceeding to welcome speech from the Dean of Faculty of Biology, Universitas Jenderal Soedirman, Professor Dr. Agus Nuryanto, MSI. Professor Agus, the floor is yours, please.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let us express our deepest gratitude to Almighty God for His blessing, which grant us the opportunity, health, and strength to gather here today in this public lecture in a good condition. May peace and blessing be upon our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whom we hope will grant us his intercession in the hereafter. Distinguished Vice-Deans, Honorable Mr. Simon, not Simon, Simon, ya, karena dari Denmark, Jerman itu lafalnya bukan Simon, tapi Simon, sesuai tulisannya. Ya. So, Honorable Mr. Simon Bruslund, harus dibaca sesuai tulisannya seperti bahasa Indonesia. From Copenhagen Zoo and his team, respected professors, lecturer, committee members, and dear students who I am proud of. It is a great honor for me to welcome Mr. Simon back to our faculty because I met him like 2 weeks ago in our faculty, and now he come back to our faculty. We sincerely thank you for your willingness to share your valuable knowledge and experience with us, especially with our students through this public lecture. I would like also to extend my appreciation to Mas Yudi for his role as a bridge between the Faculty of Biology and Copenhagen Zoo, particularly with Mr. Simon. This truly reflects the dedication and contribution of our alumni, Mas Yudi ini alumni, toward the development and progress of their alma mater. We hope that this public lecture will serve as an initial step toward a broader and more meaningful collaboration between Copenhagen Zoo and the Faculty of Biology in the future. Moreover, in the near future, we will establish a study program in natural resources conservation. Therefore, the collaboration with Copenhagen Zoo will be highly meaningful for the development, advancement, and sustainability of the program. Ya, mudah-mudahan sebentar lagi kita akan punya program studi baru, yaitu program studi konservasi sumber daya hayati, dan mudah-mudahan kerjasama dengan Copenhagen Zoo ini akan sangat bermakna dan sustainability program studi nantinya yang akan kita dirikan. For the student, please understand that this event is not only part of our faculty's regular program, but also a meaningful effort to enhance the academic atmosphere, broaden your experience, and also expand your international perspective. Ya, jadi tolong cermati, ikuti dengan seksama. Ya. And also, please take advantage of this moment to explore insight into the role of biological science in biodiversity conservation, opportunities for studying in Denmark especially, or maybe in other country outside of Indonesia, and also maybe can discuss about the potential international careers, particularly with non-governmental organization like Copenhagen Zoo. The Indonesia non-governmental organization, but maybe in Denmark, this is governmental organization. Okay, not profit, yeah, not profit government, but this is governmental organization, right? Okay. So finally, I would like to once again express my sincere gratitude to Mr. Simon for this time, and for his time, and for sharing his knowledge with us. I am also wish all students a fruitful and inspiring session. Finally, I apologize for any shortcomings in my remark, and this is also opening ceremony, so okay. So just before I close my speech, in accordance with the committee's request, I hereby officially open this public lecture with recite Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Yeah. Thank you very much for your attention. Saya akhiri, billahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Prof. Agus Nuryanto, for the speech. Before we continue to our next agenda, we will have certificate of appreciation granting and group photo session for Dekanat. To Prof. Agus and Mr. Simon, please come forward to the center for the room for certificate granting. Continue by photo session, please. Okay, continue with photo session. Prof. Nuning, Pak Erwin, Pak Romi, Mas Yudi, please. Okay, thank you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the main agenda of today's program, the general lecture session. This session will be moderated by Mr. Romi. Please allow me to briefly introduce him. Mr. Romi, or Romanus Edi Prabowo, is a faculty member at the Faculty of Biology, Universitas Jenderal Soedirman. He earned both his master's and doctoral degrees from Shiba University, Japan. His academic expertise includes marine biology and bioinformatics. Now, without further ado, let us warmly welcome Mr. Romi to lead the session, please.
Okay, good morning, distinguished guests, respected colleagues, and dear students. It is an honor and privilege for me to welcome you in this general lecture hosted by Faculty of Biology, Universitas Jenderal Soedirman. In an era where biodiversity loss and wildlife trade and ecosystem degradation at the high-speed rate, the need for collaborative science-based conservation very urgent. So today we are truly fortunate to have with us a speaker which careers stand on the front line of the conservation effort globally. So our distinguished guest, Mr. Simon Bruslund, currently serves as Director of Global Development at Copenhagen Zoo. Is that right? Copenhagen Zoo, Denmark. And in this role, he leads international conservation and research strategies, oversees a multidisciplinary team across several countries, and works closely with the global partners to advance wildlife protection and animal welfare initiative. So more than 20 years of experience in wildlife management and conservation, Mr. Bruslund has contributed more than 70 peer-reviewed publications and books, and also actively involved in international conservation network. So his work is very, very wide and very, very, very good in this conservation effort worldwide. Today, he will share insight through his lecture entitled Protecting Global Wildlife Together, an Introduction to Applied Conservation Research. So this lecture will provide us not only with a scientific perspective, but also with the real world experience on how collaboration research and innovation can shape the future of our biodiversity conservation. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, so join me to welcome Mr. Simon Bruslund. Please come forward. Time all yours. You want, okay, just up to you. For the lecture to start, should I do?
Thank you, Pak Romy. Thank you, Professor Agus. This is quite an honor and a pleasure to be here talking for you, all of you today. I'm afraid I will have to look sometimes in the back. Oh, it's there, so I can see the presentation up here. It's good. Can we change to? Oh, this is just good. I can see it there. It's all right. But we need the presentation mode. And a clicker. So I hope my presentation will be readable, but I trust that it will be available for you to use afterwards if you want to have more details out of the presentation. You go under display settings, you can shift. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you very much. So my presentation will be long. I apologize in advance. I will do my best to be interesting and witful. If I fail this, I apologize now. So let's see how that goes. But the focus of our collaborations in conservation is that it never works when you do it alone. And that's why our motto is protecting global wildlife together, and the emphasis is on together. We have to work together. We need many eyes, we need many activities, and we need the local knowledge paired with the wider view, and we need to bring the global knowledge to the local and the local to the global. So standing close together, if it's meerkats or people, it's the same effect. Working back to back is the best way that we will save the biodiversity of this planet. I will give you an introduction. I will go through different topics. This is not my work alone. As working together, it's many people who have contributed. I will not read up the list, but many of the colleagues who have helped me with materials and knowledge for this presentation are from Indonesia. And the focus will be on the global biodiversity and the global biodiversity crisis. We will focus on the applied conservation research, and the focus also on applied, that we do research which can also be used in praxis in order to save species and habitats. And then I will focus in the end about local initiatives and local activities here in Indonesia. But what is biodiversity? And I'm sure at the biological faculty you are all aware, but I just want to reiterate the biodiversity as being 3 levels. We have genetic diversity, which is important for the survival of species. We have species diversity, and you can see here I show a mosquito because all species are relevant. And we have ecosystem diversity. So these are the 3 levels of biodiversity that we work with, and when we work in biodiversity conservation, we need to take all 3 levels into account. Some may ask, why does he choose a mosquito? But some species are maybe less charismatic, but still very important for the environment. And still, ever again, in nature, there are species that cannot stop to inspire us and admire us. And one of those are this species, the Saptis mosquito from Brazil. It's also a blood-sucking mosquito, but look at the nature design of this species. It's amazing, right? So why do we do this? Why do we want to save biodiversity? And of course, biological biodiversity is the one thing that keeps nature together and ensures that we have a healthy environment, that we have a functioning environment. But above all, it helps us, or helps nature, helps life on this planet to be resilient to change. If we did not have diversity, change will be devastating for life on this planet. Diversity makes it possible that we can adapt when change happens, and change will happen in life. History shows it. But there are, of course, different things that benefits people directly, and food, oxygen, medicine are coming out of biodiversity that helps our health and help us keep us alive and happy, if you like. But to be happy, we also need inspiration, and nature inspires us. It provides economy, it provides opportunities for humans. And finally, it's the ability to adapt to changes. And we can easily say, what is species to me? What is relevant with this mosquito that is threatened? If it disappears, who cares? Do I care? But we'd never know, and that is maybe your generation's job, to find out how important are the web of life for the survival of all species. And if one species is lost, what are the consequences? And very often we know much too little about this. We don't know which species is the next to disappear that's going to cause a domino effect that's going to jeopardize even our own lives. So we often get occupied with the local crisis. Missing on this cartoon is the current threat of war, which occupies all of us and costs enormous amount in our global economy. But these are actually small problems in the big perspective. And if we could use our resources instead of for preparing for war and fighting pandemics, maybe we need to use our resources to maintain the biodiversity, and in that process also
fight the global climate crisis. And if we would all put our minds to this, the world would probably be a much better place anyway. The organization IPBES have identified 5 major threats to biodiversity. And I will just go through those 5 major threats because they're relevant in our work. They're relevant in how we decide to and how we design our conservation and research activities. The first one is, of course, the climate change. Climate change is man-made, and climate change causes changes that are rapid for the environment, and this threatens species and especially it threatens ecosystems. Sometimes it's too dry, sometimes it's too wet, and sometimes species run out of space to be, if it's an island or if it's a mountain where species are depending on certain temperatures. A very vivid and close example is Mount Slamet, where you have a finite height of the mountain. The species that are dependent on a certain climate, they can move up if it gets warmer, but at some point the volcano stops and there's no more place to go. So climate change is very relevant for saving or preventing species and biodiversity loss. The other topic is pollution. We see it everywhere and everywhere in the world. Pollution in one country influences other countries. It's a global topic. Plastic moves around for decades and centuries, and it also impacts biodiversity. And then there's the loss of space. We develop cities, but we also develop agriculture. For instance, here it looks very idyllic, but this is a Christmas tree plantation in Denmark. Also here, a wonderful and beautiful rice paddy field in Indonesia. It's fantastic to look at, but it's still monoculture crop. And I have a problem with here we go. It's monoculture crop, and that means it's a low availability for biodiversity. There's very few species surviving in it. And the more space we use, the less space is there for biodiversity. I think oh, here it is. It's just going a little slower over there. We have a lot of space taken away by humans, but we have even more space taken away by our livestock. So of the whole biomass on this planet, most of it, 90% of animals at least, is taken up by livestock, by our domesticated animals. So very few space available for the wildlife. And it's similarly in plants. A lot of the biomass is taken up by our crops. And a lot of our crops are used to feed our livestock. So humans have a huge impact, and the loss of available space is a big factor. Another big factor is invasive species. Species that are introduced into the environment in areas where they do not belong. And cats is a good example. They do a lot of damage to local wildlife because they are kind of protected predators. They will go to your homes, and at night they will catch wildlife, and they will not suffer the normal pressures as other wildlife species does. And invasive species include the cane toad in Australia as a famous example. In South American species that are moved that has no natural predators, or plants that cover the ground and do not allow space for natural plants. And I could talk all day about these topics. The final major driver of loss of biodiversity is exploitation, the direct exploitation, hunting, fisheries, and of course the live animal trade, or the plant trade, trading with threatened species, or just generally utilizing wildlife as bushmeat or sources of income. So those are the 5 threats for biodiversity that we have as our enemy, if you like. That's what we're fighting against to save the biodiversity. The Copenhagen Zoo is about 160 years old. It's a traditional institution in Denmark. This is 100 years ago. This is a picture from recently. And the zoo has evolved as well, and the biodiversity protection has not always been a big part of its mission, but in the last 20 years it has become a major part of our identity and our work. Another major part of our work is the education in the zoo, the education of the public. We're trying to create a more natural relationship to nature and understanding for nature with the general public. And if you meet people from the general public, and I hope you can all relate to this, some are very connected to nature. They are very excited about animals, sometimes maybe too much. And other people are disconnected. They have no clue. They are losing touch with nature. And if you look at the population, I'm afraid that we could categorize most of them in too much or too little. And I would like to see a world where more people is in the middle, more people have a healthy relationship to nature. And that's what we're trying to do with our public education activities in the zoo, and we're also trying to do that in most of our projects. And we also try to take the topic of biodiversity conservation out of the really do not know which block is the wrong block. So if we are not cautious, if we are not evidence-based, if we are not exploiting nature in a cautious way, we may risk to pull the wrong block out of the game, and it will harm all of us. A little bit about our global projects, and this is a heat map of global biodiversity. And as you can see, Indonesia is very colorful because of your wonderful biodiversity richness. Somewhere very dark blue on the top is Denmark. The biodiversity in Denmark is not very relevant. Denmark is a small country. Still, as a small country in the European Union, Denmark has the lowest amount of percentual protected areas. I am not proud of this as a Danish person. And I am definitely, we're fighting as a zoo to encourage the public, who can maybe encourage the politicians to do more. And I think it is happening in Denmark. But the real focus for biodiversity conservation is in the tropical countries that has the highest level of biodiversity. And we try to use our resources and our knowledge to help in these areas. Therefore, we have projects around the world, not just in Denmark. We have some projects in Europe, and most of them are in Denmark. We have projects in Africa, in Morocco, in the north, and in South Africa. We have projects in realm. And finally, we have some cross-cutting projects that are looking at climate change or genetic diversity, for instance. And as I mentioned, many of our projects are focused on Denmark. The biodiversity that we worry about in Denmark is mainly linked around invertebrates and amphibians, which are two very threatened groups, terrestrial groups. We, as a Copenhagen Zoo, we don't have an aquarium, so we don't have aquatic research, but there is in Copenhagen another institution, an aquarium that we work with that is focused on this area. So our main focus is on terrestrial animals. But that goes all the way from microorganisms to invertebrates up to mammals and birds and reptiles and amphibians. In Denmark, we're very worried about beetles, and in particular, beetles that depend on dead wood. Because, like in many countries, we have optimized and perfectionized our forestry practice, and that means that we cut down the dead trees, we cut down the living trees even before they become dead trees. But for the biodiversity, the cycle of dead wood that actually feeds the living trees and the plants and the animals, and the beetles that lives off dead wood becomes indicator species. And in Denmark, we're losing these indicator species, which is a sign that we have a problem in the cycle of the natural forest. So we are working on beetle projects. We're working on beetle projects in Denmark where we're trying to, on one side, rescue some of the most threatened species. We have a captive breeding program. In each of these boxes, there are hundreds of little beetle larvae. And we reintroduce these to the Danish forest using proxies of dead wood. We use boxes that contain sawdust, and the beetles will live there for 3 years. And in the interim time, we create dead wood in the forest by actually killing some of the living trees so that we have a natural succession in the habitat, and not just as you have in a plantation, all the trees have the same age and the same health, which is similar to monoculture crop. Here's the nice beetle larvae. We research these as well. We do genetic research. We do morphological research on these beetle larvae to learn more about them. We have a project in French Polynesia where we work with the rarest bird species, some of the rarest bird species in the world. The first one on this row is the Fatuhiva monarch, and there's less than 20 birds left of this species. 20. That means they together, those 20 birds, probably weigh less than the meal you're going to eat tonight. It's a tiny amount in the big global perspective. But our objective is to learn if we can save this species that is so rare from extinction. The reasons for that it's threatened are invasive species, so we're fighting invasive species, particularly cats and rats, which are not native to the islands where the species come from. And we do a captive breeding program where birds are reared and reintroduced to the wild to optimize the recruitment process for these threatened birds. We work in Morocco, where we work particularly with youth, that we aim to give capacity building to work in the environmental sector. And we are trying to work with we are working with the government of Morocco to reintroduce the northern bald ibis here in the center, which is a species that disappeared from most of Europe and Middle East and North Africa around the 1980s. We work in South Africa with rhinos, where we do rhino poaching patrols. We have a tiny aircraft that we do surveillance with, and we have a team that is day in and day out working on rhino surveillance. And surveillance means data, so we're having lots of data, and one of our next publication coming out is looking at the population viability of the southern white rhino in the Johannesburg National Park. In South America, we work with the golden lion tamarin, a small primate. We work with local partners that we have built relationships with over 40 years. The species is coming back, and not least due to these kind of forest corridors, because these primates, they survive in a highly fragmented environment. Only small patches of forest survive, and they cannot connect to each other. So what does that mean? It means a loss of genetic biodiversity. Because there's no connection between the small population, they become inbred and they become genetically poor. By connecting the areas with corridors of forest, we can enhance the genetic diversity, we can also move animals around, but we create areas that are interconnected with a higher population of animals. We monitor this with research. These monkeys here, they have a transmitter on their neck, and you can see that they're easy to find, and the black patches in the coat is actually paint, so we can follow them and recognize them individually. But we also do real research activities, and the research activities are essential to inform our conservation activities. If we don't have evidence base when we start a project, we often end up making wrong decisions or choosing wrong partners. So doing research is an integrated part of our daily work. We have 5 areas of focus. It doesn't mean we don't do research in other areas, but we have 5 areas that's really important for us. And the first one is population biology. We are researching genetic diversity in population, demographic dynamics in populations, and we're looking at population development over time, so population trends in the wild as well as in zoos. We have a long tradition of looking at animal welfare. We have animals in our zoo, so they're easy to observe. We have for decades invited students to observe them, and we've been looking at fundamental research in animal behavior. But we are changing this to become more applied by looking at the animal welfare perspective. So we're looking at animal behavior to focus on improving their welfare in zoos as well as in our conservation projects. Then we look at ecology. One of the important points that we work on, and which Masyuti is very involved with, is the movement of animals. So putting radio collars or trackers on animals and see how they move, how they live in a spatial perspective, but also how they are interconnected. What are their diets? How do they live in the environment? What kind of habitat do they use? This is really important. We're looking at zoological medicine. Having a zoo, we have veterinarians who does regular research on animals from anatomy to disease outbreaks. And these can be relevant just in the zoo, but they can also become really relevant for wild populations, and particularly with the One Health perspective. Is an animal susceptible to a disease, or is an invasive species translocated from South America to Indonesia? It can bring with it diseases which native species are not resistant against. And finally, we research wildlife criminology. This is a topic where we are looking at the illegal wildlife trade, or illegal hunting, or illegal taking of any type of natural species. In South Africa, we're focused on rhinos. In Indonesia, we're focused on songbirds because of the songbird crisis you may have heard of. I will talk more about that. Anatomy is important. If we learn to know, get to know a species well, we can then maybe better prevent diseases. The Tasmanian devil have suffered from a cancerous disease for many decades. Now we're seeing how they, I put the picture with the lighter just for Yudi. It's an internal practical joke, I apologize very much. I say it's a very Indonesian thing, because every time we find some footprint or track in our projects, my colleagues from Indonesia, they always put a lighter next to it for a size measurement. Problem is, in Denmark, people don't smoke anymore, so nobody knows how big is a lighter. But it's an internal joke, sorry about that. But the anatomy is important. Understanding anatomy will help us being more successful. Understanding diseases. Here's a series of studies on papilloma virus in different species, from polar bears to elephants to giraffe, which have led to a series of publications coming out of the Copenhagen zoos, working together with partners in respective countries and various universities. We have a large knowledge base about anesthesia, about sedation of animals. We have started doing this in the zoo, and meanwhile we're doing it routinely in the wild, with rhinos in South Africa, with bantangs in Ballarat National Park. Has led to multiple of publications. The animal behavior have shifted to welfare, so we have now researchers in the zoo who are focused on animal welfare assessments. I have a PhD student who's working on cockatoos with a strong focus on the Indonesian species of cockatoos, because these are threatened with extinction. We have been looking at genetic diversity of species, which is relevant when we also look at the wildlife criminology. If we can determine exactly where a specimen or an individual originated, if it's confiscated in a foreign country or away from its natural habitat, we can bring it back to the correct location if we have this knowledge. We also work in the topic of fertility of primates. And this is relevant for the fertility of humans and has been relevant for a large study, a large ongoing study in Denmark looking at the global fertilities of people. We have a postdoc who has just finished his project on diagnosing Aspergillus infections in birds. This has long been known in zoos, but also in the wild, as the silent killer. It's a disease you never notice it's there until it's too late. But with genetic methods, we can now identify the disease by simple PCR tests, and we can determine the degree of infection, and potentially we can save individuals of very threatened species even before we can see they're sick. We work on tracking species related to climate change. We want to know how climate change is affecting the movement of species. We want to know how climate change is affecting the population growth of species. And we do that mostly by tracking. Here's my colleague Mats, he's putting a tracker into the heart, or onto the heart of a oryx antelope in Arabia, or here they were putting trackers, radio collars on muskox in Greenland. And we even have a student in South Africa who is putting trackers in snakes, in puff adders, releases them and see how they respond to very hot days or very cold days. We work in Malaysia, and particularly on the Malayan tapir, the Asian tapir, which is also, of course, in Indonesia and Sumatra. And our colleague in Malaysia is part of the IUCN tapir specialist group. And I hope in the future that this specialist group will also work and collaborate with projects in Indonesia. This leopard is just waking up after anesthesia. It now has a radio collar. This is the work of Masyudi. And it's still confused, it's still a little dizzy after being sedated. But its slight suffering helps science. We collect data, we can publish about this, and it leads to decision documents, national important documents for Indonesia, how to manage wildlife species. When we know how they move, when we know how big their territories need to be, then we can make the right strategic decisions for saving species. We have the concept of biodiverse production. As I said before, in Denmark there's not enough deadwood. The trees have all the same age, and when they get old, they get cut. And I do see the same problem in Indonesia. If there's dead wood in the forest, it's quickly taken as firewood or as timber. And the problem is that the minerals stored in these old trees are essential for the new trees coming up. And by depleting the minerals generation after generation, our forests everywhere in the world are becoming poorer. And the indicators of them becoming poorer are the insects that also depend on the dead wood. These are the first things that we can see that suffer, but in the long term, the whole forest will suffer. So we're researching this topic in Denmark. We're looking into the importance of deadwood in the forest. We're doing small measures with production forest, who has a need to do still a profit, and they have timber, but by doing small efforts, we can make their profit sustainable into the future. If they do not adapt these methods, if forestry generally in the world do not adapt methods to improve the circular economy of their forest, they will lose out in the long term. So listening to you guys researching this topic will be important for the economy of timber industries. We have a biobank at the Copenhagen Zoo. It's a part of a network of biobanks in Denmark with the European zoos. We collect samples of animals. And that problem with doing genetic research every time is, I like to do a genetic research, I have the machines, I have the knowledge, I have the technology, but where's the samples? It's always the problem. So by collecting samples routinely, continuously over time, when you're then ready with your PhD or your master's study, then we can say, we have some samples, and you can start directly. The Asian songbird crisis has been a focus of mine before even I arrived at Copenhagen Zoo. And this is also the way I met Masudi. We both worked on this topic for many years. And there's a clear evidence that throughout Asia, songbirds are disappearing in the forest. We call this the silent forest, or the Asian songbird crisis. And we've been researching the trade. We want to understand which species are affected. We want to understand why are people trading the species. We want to gain more knowledge on this topic. And we see that songbirds are affected globally. Populations are going down. There's a high demand for living songbirds. In Indonesia, some species like the Javan pied starling are extinct in the wild. Or here, this is your bird. This is a panda bird from Sumatra. It's the Sumatran laughing thrush. What a gem to have as a country, but they're unfortunately disappearing. Or the Javan leaf bird. Unbelievable birds. The problem is, because of the profit of a few people in the bird trade, the species is lost from the forest, and their song will not be available for your children to hear in the future. And the songbird crisis is essential. We have hundreds, maybe even thousands of species being affected by songbird trade globally. And you can routinely visit markets in Indonesia and find more than 200 native species on sale at any one time. Some birds are protected in CITES. Many species are protected in CITES. So they have enjoyed global protection. And some groups of birds like parrots or birds of prey, it's nearly 100% of the species that are protected. But in the songbirds, for some reason of misjudgment, the songbirds only have about or less than 2% of them having global protection. So there is a knowledge gap about the ones, because all the information we have about international trade in birds is the species which are already protected, because there we collect data. But the species which are not protected, we have no information. They become invisible for our eyes. We did a recent publication on this, where we looked at the songbird trade from West Africa, where birds were, until 2007, they were CITES listed. And then the decision by Ghana was taken to remove them from the CITES list. And suddenly, it looked like the trade stopped because it was no longer visible. And it was celebrated as a success, a conservation success, for many years, until we realized the trade had continued with no change in the volume. Our response to this is research. We collect information about different species, and we research topics of social nature. We try to publish data that can inform things like the IUCN Red List. And you have seen recent years that some songbird species of Indonesia have gone from least concern on the red list all the way up to critically endangered. We have developed what we call the Songbirds in Trade database, SITDB. It's an open source database which can be accessed by anybody, but it's particularly used by students, researchers, and government officials like customs officers who want to know if the species is protected or if its species is threatened by trade. And we have developed what we call the Songbird Knowledge Index, which I will come into a little bit later, but we're using all of this information to do advocacy. So we're approaching global frameworks like CITES to advocate for better listing, better protecting of songbirds. And we also occasionally have opportunities to talk with colleagues like government officials in Indonesia, encouraging Indonesia to take a stronger stance internationally on their own songbirds. Because this is a prerogative of your nation, is to protect your species also from the international trade. And you can ask the international community through frameworks like CITES to assist you with this work. So, in the Songbird Species Knowledge Index, we layer data sets. So we take sets of information about which species are traded. I think I'm slowly sliding down here. We're taking knowledge about species, which species are traded, which species are threatened, which species are declining in population, which species have sensitive to global change, climate change, and then we layer the information to give us data about priorities. Which is the species that we should focus our research, and which are the species that we should focus our international or national protection status. And this has led to a whole series of publications about species, many of them in Indonesia, but a lot of it globally. So in Indonesia, the crested jay shrike or the butcher birds, which are just coming out at these days, some publications about emerging trends in the trade. Emerging trends happen when a species that usually is traded no longer is available because it's threatened, and the trade interest shifts to a new species, and we've seen this happen many times. A long-term traded species is a grayback myna or the black-winged myna, which is a popular species to keep in Indonesia. And we're seeing these birds being traded out of the national parks, and we have some responsibility for that, and I will come back to that a moment later. We have published reports on this topic. We've been looking at the black-throated laughing thrush. This is a Chinese and Vietnamese species which is traded internationally, including to Denmark, but also to Indonesia. There's a trade demand in Indonesia to import this species into the country. And other laughing thrushes are equally threatened, so we've been looking at Indonesian and Chinese laughing thrushes. It's a group of birds that are particularly threatened. This one is the colored laughing thrush. It's from Vietnam, and it's only exists in a very small area. Basically, it's only in protected area, and it's a nationally protected species in Vietnam. Still, we see them in the trade in Europe. This video is from a bird shop in Portugal. So they're internationally traded, but that means they have been illegally smuggled out of Vietnam, and they have illegally been smuggled into the European Union. So there's a real crime happening in the process.
Anjir, kan masa aku kau ngeresum nih. Apa yang kau resum tuh mas? Iya, hasil presentasi orang ini Denmark nih. Iya. Macam mana kau cara ngeresum itu? Ya itulah, gue bilang bingung. Aku minta ringkasannya sama kawan aku. Iya, masalah tuh pakai bahasa Inggris, Cok. Entah, disuruh. Iya juga, maksudnya dan juga sekali lewat kan. Iya. Kan?
That's the risk of multitasking, eh? So we're seeing trade in North American songbirds. We're seeing them coming into Europe. It's also illegal. They're fully protected in the US, but these are bluebirds, North American bluebirds, or common bluebird. And this species are showing up, this case, in Italy, or other species which are common in North America, but they're migratory. So they fly to Mexico or Cuba, and from there they're being smuggled to the European Union through Spain. Most of the consumers of these birds are found in countries like Denmark, or for instance, in Germany. So, let's get through this. We also have been looking at other groups that are under studied. So parrots we know a lot, and birds of prey we know a lot, but songbirds are understudied, but also pigeons and doves. And they're very popular in Indonesia and in other places, and the Cuban quail dove has been traded illegally to Europe, and we're currently ongoing studies on this. And in the past we studied the silvery pigeon. It used to be a mythical species from Indonesia. Nobody knew where they existed. They just knew they existed somewhere in Indonesia. And about 10 years ago we found them in the north of Aceh and in Simelu Island and in Nias Island. And so we've found them since in the trade, illegal trade, because it's a protected species in your country. So we have done a publication to support the Indonesian government in justifications for fiscal work. The conservation frameworks that we work in include IUCN, which is really important. IUCN is a big global network, and if you have not have access to IUCN yet, I would recommend that you explore it a little bit. And Mas Yudi is a member of some specialist groups, for instance, working on different conservation topics. The IUCN has also developed frameworks for decision making and for collaboration. So one area is what we call the conservation planning specialist group, and we host in Copenhagen the European group of the conservation planning specialist group, but there's also an Indonesian conservation planning specialist group. And this is an important framework, gives you important tools on how best to work together. How am I doing for time? Am I really behind? CITES is another framework that we've been working at. It's the global protection of species that are threatened by trade. We try to lobby and influence and advocate for better protection of species. But the only way to advocate, the only way to go to a global framework where global leaders are meeting to discuss species fate is not to come with an opinion, because everybody have an opinion. We need to come with scientific facts. If we bring facts to the table, if we bring science to the table, the decision makers takes us serious. And that's how we have global influence on these frameworks. And we can become a little bit of a watchdog and take care of and keep an eye on the political activities, which are not always scientifically founded. At the very end here, I just want to talk a little bit about our local activities, our collaboration in Indonesia. And this is the work where we come with some global knowledge, but we have the local context. The local context is important for our success in both conservation and research work. But the local context always feeds back to the global. So the one doesn't work well without the other. And in the end, it depends on people. It depends on teams. We have in our global team many wonderful staff and collaborators. Some of them are researchers, some of them are technicians. And most of our global team is from Indonesia. We have currently 11 staff in our Copenhagen staff in Indonesia, but we also have our collaboration deals, so that's our extended teams. And here's from our extended teams, Mas Ari and Bu Inga here. They're part of one of our partner teams. But the teamwork is essential, the collaboration across, and that enabled us to do those activities. And this is one of our partner projects, and it's right here in Banyumas. We're working close to Mount Slamet in a village called Karanggodang. And that's our focal area to prove a concept of community collaboration to protect songbirds. And it is a Copenhagen Zoo-led project. It's funded by the Hempel Foundation, but all of the work is carried out by our local partners, which is BISA Indonesia, and here locally, in particularly the Biodiversity Society. And they work with the local communities, they work with the local village, and they're turning what used to be bird poachers and nearly criminals in an environmental sense into conservationists. We have villagers now collecting data for citizen science. We have villagers monitoring birds, protecting birds, and preventing other poachers from encroaching into their area where birds are protected. And it is very much our hope that this work will not only lead to more birds being in the village of Karanggodang. Older people will tell us in Karanggodang there has not been any bird nest inside the village for decades. But now they're in the gardens of people because nobody in Karanggodang is catching birds anymore. So the Safeness Project focus on some of the most threatened species of birds in Indonesia. One is the gray-backed myna, which exists only at the moment in the Baluran National Park in the East Java, but also the blue flycatcher. Let's see if I can get it here again. Which is the Javan blue flycatcher, Soedirman Banyumas. It's named after this region, but it's now extinct. It's disappeared in Central Java. We are working on this project to bring them back. It's a beautiful bird with a wonderful song. But also in the mountain of Mount Slamet, you'll find species like the Javan green magpie or the rufous-fronted laughing thrush. These are charismatic mountain species with small, tiny distributions. And my experience is that when you first meet people in the villages, like in Karanggodang, people know this. People know these birds. People even know that these birds are disappearing. They have great local knowledge. But then in the conversation, because we meet eye to eye talking about birds, but in the conversation they go, yeah, it's bad, they're disappearing. But luckily, in Denmark, you have plenty. And that's where the local knowledge sometimes loses its limit, or finds its limit. Because the local knowledge about the birds being in Mount Slamet are great, but the people working and living there the whole life, they don't realize that the same birds don't exist other places, that they only exist in Mount Slamet. And when this information sinks into the people, when they understand that, we have this wonderful moment, I call it the aha effect. The people go, oh, yeah? They understand. The bird is only here. They understand, I have responsibility. 2 days later, they're protecting birds instead of catching birds. It's wonderful. So our areas of working with the Safeness Project is really focused on Central Java, Dieng Plateau. It's focused a little bit in East Java, but Mount Slamet is a key site for us. Many endemic species, not just birds. And it's areas just south of Mount Slamet, your side of Mount Slamet, are fantastic forests and have these unique species and need to get some of their unique species back. I would love to see the red-rumped shamas back in the gardens of Purwokerto. And here we have the savannas of Alas Purwo National Park, where the greyback myna, the most brave bird in the world, see how it walks between the legs of these deers. Or the Javan, like the greater green leaf bird. So these are species we work with, and these are people we work with, and we have had students come out doing biodiversity monitoring baseline examinations at our site in Karangodang. They then mostly work with the team, with TBS, with ENGA, and we have our local team of ex-poachers, we like to call them ex-poachers, setting up listening devices, trail cameras, collecting data about birds, and maybe even being innovative, finding solutions where sometimes as an academic you're reaching your limit to say, this doesn't work in the rain. Oh, these villagers that will find a solution for you. Even how to get into a tree. In East Java, we don't work in the same way. In East Java, we have a government MOU, so we work together with the national park authorities in the Ballarat National Park. UD has been working there since 2014. And in Ballarat National Park, the Copenhagen Zoo operates on behalf of the national park a research station. The research station is a place where meetings can happen, where lectures can be held, where trainings can be made for the national park staff. It's a place where we have some places where students can stay overnight. There's dormitories, so students can stay for extended times doing research inside the Ballarat National Park, in the center, at the heart of the Ballarat National Park. And it is a quite unique place for Indonesia. It's much drier than Banyumas. And it has been coined Little Africa, and it links quite a bit to some of our work in South Africa, because it's the same kind of savanna habitat that we work with. There are important species like the banteng, the Javan bird, and also the Javan green peafowl, which are all threatened with extinction. The savanna habitat is unique, and it has also unique Indonesian species of acacia, and we're trying to prevent the spread of invasive acacia from Africa and reintroduce the native species. And our research is showing that it works, that when we change to natural species, the volume, the diversity of the biological availability there increases massively. And we do fire controls in the area, which is a complicated, even political complicated matter. As you know, Indonesia has suffered from forest fires So there's limitations to using fires, but in a savanna habitat, fires is a natural phenomenon, so it's a complex topic to study. We have many high diversity of ungulates in the area, including deer, but more importantly, sitting on the deer, we have the greyback miners, which we monitor. This is the last black-winged miner population in Indonesia that's truly wild, and there's about 190 birds that we study regularly. And currently, a student from your university is working on this species and monitoring numbers, looking at the population dynamics. We also, for the greyback miners, we work with local communities. We try to educate school children using techniques both from Copenhagen Zoo, but also with our local team, going out, engaging, and socializing with the local communities, and particularly the children, which of course are the decision makers of the future. We also work in Ballarat with the Javan waddy pig. The Javan waddy pig went extinct in East Java, and we are now doing an effort to bring this species back. Back to the story, what does this species, why is it important? Well, this species is a very important prey species for Javan leopard, for dholes, so it's a relevant species to have in the environment. It also turns over the soil, the ground, it gives plants an opportunity to grow. Some plants may even be depending on pigs in the environment. So having Javan waddy pigs is essential. They are near extinct because of the African swine fever, so an invasive disease introduced to Indonesia. But Indonesia is actually the highest diverse country in the world for wild pigs. There's 11 species, no, 10 species of wild pigs in Indonesia. There's nowhere in the world that has this many species of wild pigs. So bringing them back to Ballarat is our ambition. We do captive breeding like we would do in the zoo inside the national park. And we have introduced about 30 wild pigs in the last couple of years, which are now getting their babies in the wild. This have received not just international attention, but also the forestry department recently visited the site, assisting in the reintroduction of these pigs, opening the gate. Nearly coming to the end, we have small other collaborations. We have been working with United Plantations, which is a palm oil producer in Kalimantan, where we've been focusing on doing more sustainable palm oil production. Very similar to the forest production in Denmark. You can still have production, you can still have a business, but if you do it a little bit more sustainable, it's better for your business, it's better for the world. And so that's an ongoing project that we have been supporting over several years, and the United Plantation is now the first oil palm producer to have their own biodiversity unit that is doing continuous biodiversity monitoring. We also work with universities in Indonesia, and I am looking forward to the newest collaboration with your university here. I think it's very relevant for us, and I would very much enjoy working with you guys on future research projects, particularly in this region, but it could be anywhere in Indonesia. It could also be in our research station, for instance, in Ballarat National Park. We're trying to redevelop an old journal. It's called Journal of Indonesian Natural History, JIN. We may reshape this in the future, but it is a supportive journal. It's free to publish in. It's an international journal, and we aim to support students or researchers or people wishing to publish internationally in their publishing skills, to get more of the valuable research that's done in Indonesia out for an international audience. We work, of course, with the Indonesian zoos. We have friends in zoos in Yogyakarta or in Bogor or in Prigen near Surabaya. We have collaboration on international breeding programs that involve Indonesian species. The new Indonesian group of IOCN, IDSSG, are a partner of our work. And we are working particularly with Masyudi on social science and citizen science data on birds, and we're supporting this work. We're not actually doing the work because that's done by amateurs and semi-professional biologists who's collecting data on songbirds or birds in general around Indonesia, and which have been collected for some time now in the Indonesian Bird Atlas, and we're proud to support this work with financially and through supporting UD, who's so strongly involved with this. So thereby I've come to the end, and if we have time we'll do a little quiz, but if not, we'll finish here. What's the timing say? I finished then.
Okay, thank you very much. Very nice. And we need a small break because we need to capture the student attendance. Please show the QR, I think. Let's have a seat. So while waiting I didn't know if working in a zoo can be such very exciting like that, yeah. Because our experience in Indonesian zoo. So while waiting for the attendance list, we move to Q&A session. Okay, they are focused on this thing. Oke, silahkan sambil yang sudah presensi ada pertanyaan. Hah? Oke.
Okay, thank you, Pak Romi. Thank you very much, Simon. Very interesting talk. And actually, if all the students follow your presentation, actually this is very interesting for biology student, actually. So, first of all, I would like to inform you that in this lecture, also some student and lecturer from Faculty of Science and Technology, State Islamic University Jambi, Sumatra, join in this lecture, actually online, via Zoom, and asking how to make a collaboration between tripartite between Copenhagen Zoo, Faculty of Biology, and also Faculty of Science and Technology, Islamic State University of Jambi, Sumatra. Yeah, interested to your topic about bird. Yeah, he is working on bird. So, yeah, a lot of projects starting from population genetic until like zoomedicine, and all of topic related to our subject actually in Fakultas Biologi, and it has been a lot of work also done by Copenhagen Zoo in Indonesia, and now including in Banyumas, but unfortunately no work has been done with us. Biology. So maybe for the future work in Banyumas or maybe in Central Java, we can collaborate, work together in some topic. Yeah, but yeah, Pak Romi and me also working on population genetic diversity, species diversity also, but both of us in marine and water or aquatic organism. Yeah, some of our staff working on terrestrial organism. Yeah, we hope that in the future we can collaborate more, and also officially a collaboration. And actually, Engars was my student. I was her supervisor during undergraduate, but for the master in UGM ya. Jadi Mbak Enggar ini dulu bimbingan saya adik-adik. Sekarang juga bekerja di Copenhagen Zoo. Tadi topik risetnya banyak sekali dan itu semua related to biology. Ya nanti kalau tertarik untuk riset bisa kontak langsung dengan Simon atau Mbak Enggar atau Mas Yudi. Okay, that's all from me. Yeah, from my perspective to your presentation. Terima kasih Pak Romi.
Thank you very much. And I would like to echo your interest in collaboration. I think it would be fantastic. And in terms of terrestrial and marine realms, still the concepts are the same. So working and adapting this to a terrestrial subject will still work with the same understanding, and I think together we can guide students who are interested in this topic to do excellent work.
Okay, we are looking for that because as already informed by Pak Dekan, we will open a program on conservation biology very soon. Yeah, so your contribution and partners also will be how to say good contribution for the program. Ada pertanyaan? Silakan. Oh ya.
Okay. I'm Nana from biology, and my question is, so there's an endangered endemic species in Indonesia, but if it requires a conservation, but in situ approaches are not feasible, it's not difficult to implement. Can ex situ conservation serve as a more effective alternative? And what should we do? What even the smallest thing we could do to raise an awareness about biodiversity? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So the student contribution can do actually for the conservation effort.
So those are excellent questions. So ex situ conservation is a relevant tool, and if you think about conservation in general, think about it as a toolbox, and make sure you use the right tool at the right time, because if you use a hammer to put in a screw, you will potentially fail. And some of the tools are expensive, and ex situ conservation is an expensive tool. So to be effective in conservation, using prevention, using maybe a different tool at the right time sooner will save efforts and time and money. So when you get to the point where no other solution is by using ex situ conservation, the general conservation effort have more or less failed. So it's like a last resort, if you like. So better to make prevention. And a lot of prevention leads to your other question. How do you create more awareness? And it's a tedious topic. Mas Yudi can sing a song about this. It's continuous. Talk about the topic, find the people to talk to. Interestingly, we as a conservationist and a biologist, we like to talk to each other. It's convenient. When I talk about your conservation, you immediately understand what I'm talking about. But it has a low impact, because you already know. So if you want to have a big impact, talk to the people who don't know. Talk to the people who didn't know about this topic. Talk to the people who have influence, but don't know how bad their influence can be. And reaching these people and thinking about strategies how to reach these people is some of the best ways you can create awareness, more awareness.
Oke, thank you. Jadi semua di ruangan ini sudah paham tentang konservasi, maka kalau Simon bicara dengan kita sudah paham. Yang penting adalah effort kita adalah menjelaskan kepada mereka yang tidak tahu konservasi, termasuk kepada pembuat kebijakan. Maka aksi-aksi mahasiswa dalam hal konservasi berpengaruh di luar komunitas kita sendiri. Any question? Ya, silahkan.
Hello, my name is Chantigi from Applied Biology. So on 2014, there was a giraffe named Marius, and he was a perfectly healthy animal, perfectly healthy giraffe. He does not cause any disease, and he is not injured. He's just a perfectly healthy and normal giraffe. However, the conservation that kept him decided to euthanize him because his genes were already too very common in giraffes in European zoos. And if he were about to have a baby, it would cause inbreeding problems. So my question is, in case of Maurice the giraffe, where a healthy animal was euthanized because its genes were overrepresented in a managed breeding program, was it ethically justified to sacrifice an individual animal for the long-term genetics health of the species? Thank you.
Oh, go ahead.
Very good question. Very happy to answer. So in the case of giraffe, which reached international attention, the Copenhagen Zoo decided to euthanize the giraffe because the alternative for this individual was to send it to a substandard zoo which may not have good conditions for the animal. And I know this is a difficult topic and we could probably talk a long time, but please understand me when I say the welfare of the individual is important for the zoo, is important for me, but a painless death is not poor welfare. Every animal that you will see in your life, every living thing that you'll see in your life also eventually will die. It's a natural process. Life and death belongs together. If a giraffe is killed, but it's done in a painless, stressless way, there was no case of poor welfare. So animal welfare was secured in this whole process. A lot of attention to this case was made by zoos who said, oh, I want the giraffe. I want this giraffe in my zoo, but they didn't have good conditions. So if some zoos, giraffes in Europe depend on heated winter houses. If the giraffe freezes every winter, suffers cold every year in its life, how good is that for the animal's welfare, right? So the decision of Copenhagen Zoo was to have a giraffe young. It improves the welfare of the mother to have a young. She nurtures this young for his life. And by the time that the young giraffe reaches the age where it normally leaves its mother, the decision was to euthanize it at this moment. There was no other good zoo who could take the giraffe. So the giraffe was killed and its meat was used for food. Ethically, killing a giraffe is no different than killing a cow. One cow and one giraffe is one animal. Actually, one giraffe and one chicken is ethically the same. So we need to see all individuals as individuals and not as being a special individual because it's a giraffe. But that is what is difficult with humans. We give emotions to a giraffe that we don't put on a cow. And in the world, every day, thousands of cows are killed for food. One giraffe made public attention. So it was, it's an ethically strange phenomena, right? But we feel comfortable that we were on the ethical good side. We do this still. The same practice goes on in Copenhagen Zoo. We have at the moment, we have 3 giraffe babies. I'm sure not all of them will find a future home. If they are genetically overrepresented, then they will be unsuited for breeding. Now the whole story has a small catch, which is very new information. So we have recently done, for the first time, the full genome on giraffes.
Oh.
At the Copenhagen Zoo was involved. Surprise, Marius's bloodline was a hybrid, so not suited for breeding. So it was a good decision in hindsight to stop this bloodline. And now we actually have some problems with other descendants from the same bloodline because they are causing a deterioration of the purity. The giraffes are not one species, there are 4 species of giraffe. And if they're hybridized, maybe they have adaptations that are less suited for the wild. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you for your explanation. That's part of the emotional side. Thank you. Question? Yeah.
Good morning, Mr. Simon. Actually, I am Sakar from Applied Biology, and I have one question. Like, I'm curious about, like, in the context of the ongoing global biodiversity loss crisis, how do conservation institutions such like Copenhagen Zoo or other zoo determine and priorities which species or ecosystem and should receive the most urgent conversation and attention? Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, also very good question, and something that's very difficult to answer. One of the very big scientific questions we have in conservation biology is how properly to measure impact. So a lot of conservation activities that we are doing anywhere in the world, the Copenhagen Zoo and other organizations, we are not 100% sure about the long-term impact of these activities. And maybe it's low and maybe it's high. The problem is that conservation activities sometimes take decades to be effective, and you cannot measure in the short term. So a lot of our research goes into measuring conservation impact. By understanding which projects, which activities now high impact will help guide our future priorities. At the moment, I prioritize diversity. Diversity also in projects. Rather have many smaller projects than a single big project, because if we find out that our singular focus was not effective, we lose in the long term. So having many different adaptations, it's kind of an analog to biodiversity itself. To understand that biodiversity helps us being more resilient and more reactive to change. Similarly, having diverse research interest and conservation activities help us having bigger priority, a bigger chance of success. We prioritize, for Copenhagen Zoo, we prioritize projects that have certain criteria, which we have known to feel successful. So any project that we start need to have local context. They need to be anchored in a local setting. So it doesn't matter if our project is in Denmark or in Indonesia. We do not do a project unless we have a local partner who is locally anchored, who have local knowledge. This is one of the reasons why I'm here today. Also, our projects, they need to be focused on a long-term effect. We know that projects take a long time to be successful, so long-term perspective is important for us. Evidence-based. We do not start projects on emotions. We start projects on knowledge of problems. So either there is a knowledge gap that needs research, then maybe we focus on it, or there's knowledge, scientific data that says there is a problem, and then we focus on it. So these are some of the key principles that we use in priorities. To evaluate our project at the moment, we look at 8 parameters, where we look at what is the influence, what is the storytelling, because one project maybe have a low impact, but an important story. And the story can lead to impact on a bigger scale. So sometimes we need to weigh the political with the scientific, with the practical, with the impact. It's complex. Yeah?
Okay, thank you very much. Cukup, jelas? More question? Oh yeah, Emir.
Okay, first of all, I would like to say thank you to Mr. Simon for the insightful material you have provided. It is very inspiring. My name is Emira, so my question is it possible that in the future for biodiversity to be transferred or moved into artificial environments like such as you already mentioned before, like biobanks or genetic gardens or synthetic habitats? And can such implementation be considered a valid effort in biodiversity conservation? Thank you, sir.
It's gone. It works. Just accidentally shut off the microphone. It's not because the question is difficult, but it is a difficult question. And you guys all have very good questions. Biosynthetics and conservation is a difficult topic. Again, it's a lot linked to us not fully knowing the consequences. And a good example are the invasive species around the world. I used the cane toad, the invasive species in Australia. This species was introduced to Australia to do good things. It was actually supposed to eat another invasive species that were causing crop problems. But the side effects were much worse even. And sometimes our actions seems logic, but in the massive complexity of the natural biodiversity system, we don't know enough about the consequences of our actions. And that's why I'm cautious and skeptic with biosynthetics in the natural environment, just because we don't know what is the effect. And it also has a risk of giving us a fake sense of security. Recently, there's been news about bringing back extinct species like dire wolf with colossal. We're using synthetic biology. But the reality is this, that these are not ecosystem-prepared individuals. These are just visual copies of something that might have been, and we don't even know if they look the way the dire wolf would have looked like. And it creates for us a sense of security in the public. So the public may think it doesn't matter when the biologist of the university says these species are going extinct, because we can just ask some rich company in America to bring them back. The reality is, so far this has not succeeded. And I am very worried that the public loses the sense of urgency for saving species from going extinct, because the thought that we can bring them back is currently not realistic. Better to prevent their extinction.
Cukup? Any question from Zoom participants? Ada?
I have a question.
Bisa dibacakan. Oh yeah, go ahead.
What other regions in Australia do cane toads invade? Because I know that cane toads actually look like the toads from Indonesia, which is Asian common toads, but more fatter.
Yeah, so the cane toad is from Middle America and South America, and it's mainly imported to Australia, northern Australia, where it thrives the most. It was supposed to eat potato beetles in Australia. That was the intention by introducing them there. But they're very voracious, and they eat any small animal, including small marsupials and small birds. And the problem in Australia is that this toxic toad don't have any natural predator. What I've seen and what we've heard about the cane toad is especially that it's established in Australia. I don't actually know any other area where it's currently causing big problems, but it is expanding its distribution in South America.
Ada pertanyaan lanjutan, Pak Fatur
No
Rahman?
way. I haven't seen the cane toad before.
Yeah, it's also known as the agar toad.
Okay, back to this room. Any more question? Yeah. Silakan.
Thank you, Mr. Simon. I want to ask just a simple question. How do you stay motivated to do these conservation activities? Because many people in my generation know it is important, but do not have the motivation to start. Thank you.
This corner is mostly graduate student.
Yeah, very good questions coming out of this corner. No, it's the motivation is important, and this can go into a bigger conversation. And maybe as you develop a conservation biology topic here at the university, the mental health and the motivation of conservationists should be one of the topics, because it is difficult to stay motivated in every day you see problems and you see more problems than solutions. And as you say, the youth have a better understanding, a better interest in environmental issues than any other generation, but they're often overwhelmed. I think the answer is to do it in small bites. Accept that you can have a small influence and you do it one step at a time. You don't change everything overnight. And a good example is like one of the bad food things that worldwide is causing biodiversity loss is the consumption of beef. But you cannot ask people to stop eating beef from one day to the other. But if every person would reduce the consumption of beef with 10%, the effect on biodiversity would be fantastic. 10% is not much. So instead of asking people, you have to become a vegetarian, they will refuse. But if you ask them, 10% less beef, eat more chicken, it's possible. It's possible for everybody. And that's maybe the way to look at it. And to how to stay motivated yourself, it does need a certain mindset. If you get angry every time you see a atrocity to nature, maybe conservation is not where you should work. Maybe you should be an activist instead. And if you want to be a researcher, you need to be able to observe, and I said accept, but the right word Masyuri said is allow. You need to allow the illegal activity that you're observing to happen. You need to allow the deforestation that you're observing to happen while you're observing it. Then you publish about it. When you have a publication, you can use this to advocate for change. That's the scientific way.
Oke. Ada pertanyaan lagi? Oh ya. Oh.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Simon. I'm Rosita, and excuse me, I have a question because I was very curious. I understand that dealing with social challenges is part of our role in conservation, right? But in your personal experience, how do you handle that situation in practice? For example, in Indonesia and other part of Asia, conservation effort often face challenges not only related to species, but also from local communities with diverse culture and limited resources. How do you deal with these challenges, and have you found any effective solution when conducting monitoring, survey, or data collection like that? Thank you.
In Indonesia, we have learned that initially, when the first time I visited Indonesia, I had a different perspective of the people who catch the birds in the forest, for instance. I thought like this just for business, and I thought the people catching the bird, they need the income, they desperately need financing their family, and they get small amounts for catching a bird, and it goes into the trade. And in Jakarta, somebody pays a big amount for the same bird. And I felt sometimes sorry for the person who catch the bird. But then I got to meet the people who catch the bird. And understand that we're very similar. I like the bird, and they like the bird. And our team we work with, they like the birds, and they can meet in this discussion. They can meet eye to eye. You like birds, I like birds. But why do you catch the birds? Well, it's interesting to be in the forest. It's good to be outside. It's a great way to have a hobby and make some income. And if you don't realize the negative impact of your activities for various reasons, maybe lack of knowledge, maybe you ignore the negative impact because you like to be in the forest. You don't know the alternatives. So by providing, for many, many years, conservation has talked about alternative livelihood. So people doing damage for income, they do deforestation for income. They sell the wood, and you provide them with an alternative. Let's do bee farming, let's do other activities that will give you income. But in catching birds, there's income is only one aspect. The other aspect is the enjoyment of going in the forest and see the birds. So this project, you need to provide for them alternative income, alternative livelihood, as well as alternative pastime with the birds. So for our project in Karangodang, maybe for Ari himself, one of these alternatives has been to photograph birds instead of catching them, to enjoy the birds, to count the birds instead of catching them. So this kind of alternative, working with the birds, has proven to be so important. And that for me has been, that's my personal aha experience, where I realized, that is what we need. We don't need just to give, here's a bag of rice, don't catch the bird. It doesn't work. Here's some incentive, funding, or alternative ways you can make livelihood. And please go in the forest and count the birds, protect them. That is working. And working at a community level is stronger than working on the individual business level. The problem with the individual business level everywhere, Indonesia and everywhere in the world, is that it becomes inflative. Means that a person who's very good at it covers the whole market. Somebody who speaks some English and knows the bird species can become a very valuable, potentially very rich bird guide in Indonesia. But it's at the cost of the village, because the one person will profit and others will not. But if a village develops a tourist incentive with a homestay and food and multiple guides, the whole village can profit. And that means the whole environment profits. But if it's one person, it's good for the person, but it doesn't help nature. Yeah?
Cukup, jelas? Okay, thank you. This room population decreasing, but some few incomings. Any more questions?
Population dynamics.
Oh yeah, population dynamic, yes.
Thank you very much for insightful lecture, Mr. Simon. My name is Ahmad Jerry from biology student. Let me ask to you, as we know, some zoos operate primarily as education center. I would like to ask, in your view, how do you define the role of a modern zoo today? Should it function mainly as an education center, a research center, or a breeding center for endangered species? Thank you very much.
Go ahead.
So a modern zoo today has all of these objectives. And it's hard to say what is the main purpose. If you ask me, the main purpose in general is conservation or nature restoration. But that doesn't work alone. It's very hard to fund nature conservation alone. But if you have a zoo that has some income, some revenue, you have a platform. Then you have a place, an institution that employs a conservationist who can then do nature conservation. Or you have a place where people gather. It's an opportunity for education. But if you instead of making a zoo, you're saying, we'll just make an education center. The problem is nobody comes. So you need all these things together. And I think also, coming back to something I said before, if you make an education center about nature, 90% of your guests will already like nature. They will already enjoy nature, which is good to talk to them. It's convenient for us to talk to them. But the people we need to come to get our education activities are the people who didn't know about nature before. So the normal zoo guest, the visitor in the zoo, any zoo, many of them come to the zoo just for entertainment, but they go home with a message. So that, I think, is an important role of a modern zoo, is to reach the people, even if the people don't know they wanted to be reached. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Several questions in the chat room. Can you please read?
Okay, there is two questions from the chat room. The first one is from Rima Pontiana. She said, it's very interesting in presentation, which human activity biggest cause of biodiversity loss? Maybe you can mention about it, and how it be addressed. So how it can be addressed. And then the second one.
I'll take the first
Oh,
one.
the first one. Okay.
So of the 5 big drivers of biodiversity loss, IPBES have actually cut this down in different realms. So if you look at the marine realm, the biggest loss of biodiversity is the fisheries, so the direct exploitation. But if you look at the terrestrial realm, the biggest loss is the destruction of habitat, because people live on land and we take a lot of space. I think, and that it becomes then very complex, right? Because then if you say, okay, if you look at birds, what is the biggest loss for birds with mammals and so forth? And in some places, in some locations, the biggest threat may be invasive species rather than the others. So, but I think globally seen, the biggest loss is the space. And we had the example just before with beef. So one of the biggest drivers of biodiversity loss is beef. Because we breed cows, cows need a lot of space, but cows also need food. And the food that we grow for the cows to eat need a lot of space. So if all of us, every person on earth will eat less beef, we don't have to stop, just eat less. It would be the biggest effect we can do on biodiversity loss on land.
Okay, Rima, could you open your mic and give the response? Is it answering your question? Okay, I think it's clear enough to answer it. And then the second one is in Bahasa, but I tried to, or can I? Okay, Simon. Okay, how to pursue the Indonesian government to
Okay, this is the question. How the outside of Indonesian parties, assign the Indonesian government, enhance the Indonesian government to assign the mountain in Java as the conservation areas, like the Slamet Mountain, for the purpose of the plants and animals conservation. Yes.
So I think in championing development of protected areas, it needs multiple voices. And starting from the village all the way to and particularly the universities can have an important role in this to justify. And again, evidence base is really important, and that's our job, to provide evidence of the need and the benefits. And maybe the emotional side is from others. Very often the development of more protected areas leads to conflicts with local communities, with local people living those areas affected. And very often the resistance of protecting areas come from lack of knowledge and lack of trust sometimes. So those two goes hand in hand. You need to develop trust that what you and what we are saying is the truth, but you also need to provide the evidence and to say the truth. So that also goes hand in hand. So as a conservationist and a scientist, we cannot say, oh, this must be a protected area if we don't actually know this is true, right? We need the evidence to say, yes, this area deserves protection. And then after that, we need to follow up with doing advocacy. We take our scientific facts and we advocate to politicians, to local communities, preempting those potential conflicts that we know are coming. And one of the biggest conflicts when protected areas occur is that the notion of the people that when this area is protected, I can do nothing. I cannot move in the forest. I cannot cut the tree. I can't do nothing because the government is taking it away. It's about loss. It's the feeling of losing something. And we have to turn that around, because the reality is, if you have a protected area close to you, it could be the opposite. You could actually gain something. But it's important that people get that feeling of gain rather than loss.
Okay, thank you. If come to conservation discussion, it can be hours. I will open 2 more questions. Oh yeah.
Okay, this is not question, by the way, because I saw that your presentation is very nice, and one of the concern is about zoo medicine, right? Zoo medicine. And I saw that you do such a histological project. So, because I belongs to the anatomy and structure laboratory, so I would like to inform you if there are some work with histology or histopathology. We are pleased to include in your project. Thank you.
Very good. Well, maybe I can complement that and say we should explore this opportunity. We have a thought at the moment. I have a colleague in Switzerland. She's a bird pathologist, but for me she's like the Sherlock Holmes of dead birds. She's really following these cases very meticulously. She has a good methodology. She's Swiss, so it's very punctuous, very correct. We have talked together about it would be fantastic to develop a field pathology course. Because sometimes it's easy to think about pathology. If you have a perfect lab, you have all your dyes and you have all of your machines, it's easy. What to do if it happens in the field, in a tropical climate, far away, and you don't have a pathologist? Can you do a remote biopsy? How can you store a sample if you only have salt and sun? You know, what can we do? And actually there are good methods, and that could be a very interesting course to develop together.
That is a challenge for you. One more question. Ada? Oh ya, silahkan.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Simon. As you mentioned earlier about the threats of global biodiversity, like exploitation such as illegal wildlife trade, my question is, what are the simplest actions people like me, like us, can take to help reduce illegal wildlife trade? Thank you.
The simplest action. Sometimes in your close environment, it's difficult to have influence on even the closest people. So you could have somebody in your family engaging directly in wildlife trade, and when I experienced this myself, and when you talk to them, and it's like, but you know, you're too close sometimes. So it can be a benefit not to focus on the close, but to look at a little bit more on the periphery of things, a little bit simpler, to be more outspoken, not an emotional term, but to say, it's kind of like the beef discussion, right? If you ask people to become a vegetarian, they will deny. But if you ask them to do less, there's a door, there's an opening, a possibility for change. In the wildlife trade, there are alternatives. Instead of taking birds from the wild, captive breeding is better. Instead of taking rare species that are threatened with extinction, working with species that are more common is better. So, and it's like a road to success. So the small steps. So if you have somebody close by who is engaging in wildlife trade, which is potentially illegal, help them being more informed, help them making better decisions on the fact that I know, like you go to them and say, I know this species is threatened with extinction. I know it exists only in a small place. Having this knowledge can set you apart from other people, because a lot of people, they know the species, but they don't know the context of the species. And that is something that a biologist student could know. Yeah. What else? Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think the session come to an end, and with this inspiring session, so let's give big applause to Simon. On behalf of
and inspiring questions.
Okay.
Very good.
As you see that if on the topic of conservation, it can be hours of discussion, but we come to an end, and on behalf of Faculty of Biology, I give a sincere thank you very much for your inspiring session, insight, and also experiences in the front line of global conservation effort. So I think this lecture is CTA, call to action for us. Yeah, call to action starting from ourselves, how to contribute to conservation effort by already told by Simon that we can start reduce eating meat, yeah, and then also we can how to say, tell to others that maybe under knowledge of the conservation. Again, thank you very much, and once more time, let's give big applause to Simon. And also thank you very much for your attendance here. I think this is the beginning, yeah, the first lecture in this year, so there will be some more general lecture. So back to you, Aulit. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Romy and Herr Simon, for bringing us to a very productive session today. And thank you for the audience. You guys are very amazing. Well done. Please give big applause for all of the audience here. It is very interesting that by participating this lecture might give us an insight how rich Indonesia nature with its mega biodiversity, but how we are facing the challenges and dangers of extinction and destruction of nature and its species. This requires us to play a role in protecting nature and its organisms. So, biology students, let's care and protect our natural resources with knowledge and wisdom. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to the last part, the photo session with the audience. For the audience, please take a place for photo session together with the speaker in the center of the room. Mr. Simon, can you please go to the center of the room, and Mr. Romy and all of the audience, please. And for all of the committees, please take a photo. Well, well, ladies and gentlemen, that's all the agenda of general lecture. Let's close this event by saying Hamdalah. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. On behalf of General Lecture Committee, the Chief, Mbak Haris Maulani, Faculty of Biology, Universitas Jenderal Soedirman, we would like to say thank you for your active participation today. I wish you all a pleasant day. I am Aulidia Nurul Habibah signing off. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.